All right, welcome to Reconsidered.
Welcome.
My name is Ethan Eloquin.
And I am Riley A.K.A.
We are glad you are here. We have a special guest today.
Yes.
His name is Tyler Morris.
Thank you for having me, guys.
What's up,
I'm very
Tyler?
excited to be here.
Yeah, Tyler. We go back
A long time, dude.
until I was in like fourth grade. You were probably fifth, sixth grade, maybe.
Pretty much oldest friends, dude.
And we used to hang out and build like forts in our
woods.
backyards and stuff, and go
Sweet.
camp in the backyard. And we had a club, which was pretty sweet.
So
Oh,
did
yeah,
y'all went to middle school and high school together, or just high school?
Both.
Yeah.
We used to ride the same bus in middle school
Nice.
Yeah.
and first year of high school.
Wait, but you're 2 years older.
Yeah,
am.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm
So
25.
he was the one that was before I came into middle school, he was giving me some advice like, hey man, like when you walk down the halls, don't just put your thumbs in your pockets. Like, don't do that.
So you were
Great
like
advice at a young age.
you were like the upperclassman who helped Ethan.
Yeah. basically.
He
Dude, that's
was,
nice
He
of
was
you.
like my
I
older.
guess the whole time I thought Ethan was the cooler one, so I don't know why he was listening to my advice.
Well, he was like the older brother that I never had, and
Yeah.
so I really appreciate having Tyler around these past couple of years.
Ethan, you have to be a pretty cool guy to allow an upperclassman to think you're the cooler one.
He was the cooler one.
Well,
That's cool.
It wasn't till I bloomed into myself that I became the cool one. Tyler was always just cooler than me back in the day. So.
Well, Tyler seems pretty cool himself, so
Yeah,
let's
right.
get to know Tyler too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
tell us just a little about like what you got going on currently in your life.
Yeah. Well, I'm 25. I live in Alpharetta. I went to KSU. I studied marketing. I'm actually I make a lot of music.
Nice.
I can produce music. Shout out to Melvin, by the way. Thank you for having us.
Malvin.
Sorry, Melvin.
No, it's all good. Yeah, shouts to Malvin for running sound for us again.
Man. But I can play guitar. I'm like classically trained on the saxophone.
Very nice.
Which is awesome.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
But when I went to school for it, I realized that I wanted to focus on having like a business career. So I started looking into marketing. And right now I work for a remodeling company, and I'm part of their sales generation team, the marketing department.
Sweet.
And yeah.
So was there like a certain idea business-wise that kind of sparked your interest in marketing, or like did you have an idea for a business? Or
No, I'm lame. My mom told me to do it. Okay?
but you have a cool idea of like where you want to be. We were
Yeah.
talking about this on the way over here, that you want to work in marketing specifically.
In an advertising agency, I am a very creative individual.
so that's a business-driven idea. So
Yes.
Yeah,
very much
It's
so.
but he wants to go into that place in business where art meets business.
Yes.
As a creative director of a marketing digital agency,
Yes.
Tyler wants to be able to use his creative skills to help businesses succeed.
right, because you produce music too, right?
I do.
Like on the side, or is that more of a full-time thing?
No, it's definitely on the side at this point. There was a period of time where I was doing it a lot. I think the majority of it was actually spent helping other people make music. I ran a summer camp where I taught other people how to make music,
Cool.
which was pretty cool.
So you and Malvin definitely get along after this.
Yeah,
after this episode.
I give him a bunch of samples. He's going to give me some too. which
Oh,
is really
sweet.
cool.
Yeah,
So
Tyler's
that's pretty cool.
definitely going to be on the Reconsidered the album.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, actually, the song at the end was going to be my song, so I hope you guys like it.
Sweet.
What's it called?
Glamber Sigh. It's,
Glamber Side.
Glamber
I like
Sigh.
anagrams are
Yes.
some of my favorite things. My producer name is Mirror Style, which is an anagram of Tyler Morris. Glamber Sigh is an anagram of Amber Giles, who is a DJ that a friend of mine that I met. She's tours with Skrillex. She goes by the name of Miha. It's really cool, really good,
Awesome.
really good DJ. So
That's
named after
a
her.
cool way to like have your name. I
Yeah.
don't- like-
Yeah, Tyler
Anagrams,
Morris
right.
turns into Mirror Style.
I've never heard of like having an anagram themed.
and
Yeah.
That's cool. Am I
Yeah.
saying it right? Anagram, right?
Yeah, anagram.
'Cause-
Well, it's like I am Lord Voldemort's Tom Ravala Riddle.
Right.
yeah,
So like
Right. Okay.
that's how I came up
it's
with the
when
idea.
you rearrange letters of a word to make a new word.
We were just talking about Goblet of Fire too.
Yeah,
right
were.
before this episode started.
Shout out to Harry Potter. We are fans.
I forget exactly who it is. I think it was it Jim Morrison has one? He has an anagram or something. What was it? Jim Morrison.
But Mirror Style is cool because as a producer, you're also a digital artist. And you have a really cool Instagram page because you have like essentially 9 of your tiles create one big image. So you don't look at it like scrolling
I've
through
seen that.
individual pictures. You actually look at,
What's your
like the
Instagram
grid
name?
view and it makes
Can you
bigger
give a little-
pictures. It's Mirror Style, right?
Plug your Instagram real quick.
It is. It's it is It's Mirror Style, MIRRORSTYLE. But there's underscores in between Mirror and Style and before Mirror and after Style.
So there's
it's
4
underscore Mirror underscore Style.
3
underscore.
underscores.
Yeah. It kind of makes it like the Mirror and Style jump off the page when you look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah, for
Cool.
sure.
But yeah, I actually was looking at this the other day. I have a lot of likes on all my pictures, which is pretty cool. But I literally will take an image and I will put it in these different programs and I'll just mess with the pixels of it and make different stuff out of it. I'll take a picture of something and sometimes just kind of keep it the same but mess with it, and sometimes I'll turn it into something completely different.
Let me see.
Oh yeah.
So I'm actually also a digital artist, and Tyler is the person who kind of made me accidentally fall into it because he told me to get this app that he uses, but Tyler has an Android phone and I have an iPhone. And so I found a different app and started creating digital art pieces on it as well. And those are just kind of on my regular Instagram page.
Well, nice. So when this is released, we will have links to your Instagram, your Facebook, all that stuff, so that people can see all this, because this is really awesome.
As Mirror Style, do you have any? I mean, you have a SoundCloud, right?
Yeah, I do.
Do you have your music published anywhere else?
No,
just really. SoundCloud.
I mean, to be honest, at this point, I just like to do it for fun. It's
right, exactly.
That, like, if I get in like a real strong emotion going on, and I just will go and I'll just make music for a couple hours, and whatever I have afterwards is something that, you know, I can just kind of listen to. I think I listen to my music more than anybody else does, and I am that dude who listens to his own music in the car.
That's cool, man.
I guess
we were talking about that recently.
Nothing wrong with that.
I think if you're an artist, you have to be able to enjoy your own things, right? Like I'm the biggest fan of what I make digitally because I like looking at the cool pictures that I've made. Yeah,
that is pretty cool too.
Pete Wentz got shit for listening to his music on an airplane once.
Really?
Yeah. That's the only thing that reminds me of.
I mean, if he like is making other people listen to it, that would be kind of.
No, I think he got caught listening to like some Fall Out Boy album or something. I don't know.
I bet Snoop Dogg listens to his own music.
I think a lot of people do.
Kanye West listens to his own music.
Yeah, that's all he listens to.
That's the bad side of listening to your own music. No. I'm not a fan of Kanye. I'm sorry, Malvin. I'm sorry.
We can't judge people based on listening to their own music. Basin Ector said that he listened to his own music more than he listens to anybody else's music because he's playing all the time. Yeah, that's the only music that he listens to.
And there's ways of creating more to write when you do that, in my sense. Like when I think about it. It opens up your mind in a way that you can go back and listen to everything you've done. Yeah,
it's a creative process,
right?
Also to get better, to learn how to do, like, to create better music, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? I'm not a producer, so.
I just noticed that a lot of people have like patterns in their music, and I'll notice like little themes. Maybe they don't mean to do them, but like there will be like a rhythm or a melody that's kind of like a theme that you will be able to find in people's music. That kind of spans like their whole time, but not even, because like people change a lot. So there's some artists that their first song they put out and the last song that they put out, like they will sound very similar, like 311. And then there's people who, as they progress in their career as a musician or an artist, like they go through very drastic changes, like the Beatles did. Right. So like, I mean, I do notice a trend or like a style or a sound associated with individual artists. And that's why you can like hear a song you've never heard before and be like, oh yeah, that's Chance the Rapper. I can tell that is. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with Chance, it's like the reason he's so different is because every album he had a different producer, and that's how a lot of hip hop artists are, and bands in general, right?
I didn't know that.
So like Red Hot Chili Peppers had Rick Rubin on a lot of albums, and he's great. You know,
yeah, the producer, I mean, as you know, plays a huge role in the final outcome of the EP or the single or whatever. So, changing up the producer helps out. That little theme too, so
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So, also that wasn't even planned. That we have another section for your prelude, which is about this book that you've been reading.
Well, yeah. The topic that we're talking about is blame, and kind of how people falsely blame, and the definition of blame is it's the act of holding someone or something responsible for doing something wrong. And my roommate for Christmas got me a bunch of books. He knows me very well, so he got me a bunch of books. One book in particular, which is kind of an interesting looking book. You guys can see it here. This is the way it's held. You can see that on the back, it actually has, it's called Thinking About the Present as If It Were the Past, and it's by Chuck Klosterman. But the front cover of it, all the text is upside down. It's kind of a funky looking book. But basically, the first chapter starts off with the quote, and it says, basically, I've spent most of my life being wrong. which is kind of a funny thing because most people don't say to themselves, well, I'm wrong most of the time. Most people are very confident in their what they say and what they believe.
Or at least they make people think that they're confident in the way what they say and what they believe.
Exactly. Well, when you argue a point, when you're like trying to talk with somebody about something, you're always like, well, this is how it is. And you talk about it as if it is that way. And you're trying to convince other people to believe the same thing you do.
Right. Do you believe that people will try and convince somebody that they're right, regardless of whether they're right or wrong, just because they want to be right?
I guess that really depends on the individual. But if there's one thing I do know about people's beliefs, it's that your belief is based in anxiety of not knowing. So if you don't know something, especially something that's important, it will stress you out like crazy. If you've been sick, like really sick, and you go to the doctor and they're like, we don't know what's wrong with you, it will drive you nuts. And you'll say to yourself, is this all in my head? Am I just making up these symptoms? Am I just like a hypochondriac? Or is there something really wrong and this doctor just doesn't know what he's talking about? So your brain is firing off all these possibilities in your head as to what's going on, why this is happening. And at the end of it, when you go to bed at night, you still don't know. And that will drive you insane. And there's something really calming about finally knowing the answer to that question that is really a life or death sort of thing. And even they say, like, even if you get something, it's like, oh, it's a terminal illness. It's like, it's terrible. You have only a couple months to live. At least at least the stress of not knowing makes you like a little more at ease about it. You can learn to accept that because you know what you're dealing with. But it's like trying to take a test, but you don't know, you can't read the questions. I mean, that's just like insane. You're going to get a lot of stuff wrong. And that makes people unhappy. People don't like being wrong. People like being right,
I think that's a good kind of quote or story right before we get into actually speaking about blame.
Yeah.
And why people, use, misuse, and abuse blame, especially the abuse of blame, because everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like this book, and did this book kind of get you thinking this way?
Well, I think I'd always kind of thought that way. And I forget if it was Socrates or Plato, but
it's probably Aristotle.
Might have been Aristotle. Thanks. Basically, he said that, a lot of times we're wrong. And I heard that at like a young age. I think it was in like middle school. And I just kind of was like, well, if Socrates said it, then it's probably pretty accurate. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, dang, like, wow, people really are wrong a lot. And I kind of got into a bit of a habit of being like, as a person, as a character trait in myself, I try to be the opposite of most people, because in my mind, if everybody's wrong all the time, I want to be the opposite of them because that'll make me right all the time. And I tried to go against the grain. And as an adult who's like just recently graduated college only a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, I've had to realize that, well, even that in and of itself doesn't prove me right by doing something that not everybody else does. I have to kind of go back into the flow of society and do things the way that most people do it, because you've got several thousand years of habit that people have created. They must have gotten some things right in that time,
It's kind of that tried and true.
Yeah, exactly. It is the tried and true.
And so it's kind of that comfort that I think we don't like, right?
Yeah.
We like new things. We like to be different, and that's what makes us unique individuals and artists, and gives us the ability to express feelings that most people don't.
We like to, you and I,
Right.
We like to, but not everybody likes being different. Some people like blending in. Some people want to be part of the crowd. And I think that it's easy to say because somebody's different that like they're wrong. It's easy to make that assertion,
Right.
But like learning to accept other people for who they are, not necessarily if they are doing something wrong, but like that negatively impacts other people, but like
if they're just doing it differently.
Yeah, they're just doing life
different than conventional, methods, which is actually what we kind of talked about with Lauren last week.
Yeah,
she has a lot of different ways to handle situations or things that other people do. So she's into essential oils, and and I know you are too. Actually, we were talking about this, but I don't know a lot of people that are into it. But that's one of the ways that she helps to heal. Like common like issues around the house, like sinus congestion and like headaches and things like that, which I think is really cool.
I could have used your help last week. had to take time off of work.
Lauren is sitting in on the episode, by the way.
So let's keep talking about this book a little bit. I want to get into it.
Well, in the first chapter, he Chuck Klosterman, he talks about stuff that basically stuff that we know to be true. So gravity is one of those things that if you're arguing that gravity doesn't exist, it's kind of like everyone's going to look at you like, dude, like, come on.
It was kind of like those flat earthers out there.
I'm a flat earther.
I hate
What
to
you
bring it
talking
up.
about, fool?
Are you? No. Don't even trick me.
Gotcha.
I saw a little infographic the other day that said that if it really was, the Earth was really flat like a disc, the further that you walk to the edge, like gravity would literally make it so that like I don't know, it's kind of
like
weird.
facing forward.
Yeah, you would literally be like parallel with the plate.
Yeah.
And if you stood on the very edge of the Earth, if it were flat like that, you would literally be standing like perpendicular to like completely different. It was weird. Of course, it would never really work.
Pretty much
that,
like impossible.
Yeah. But
yeah.
It was
Well,
pretty cool to see.
Real quick, do you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience at all?
I do listen to. I have seen excerpts from him. I like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I don't sit.
Yeah,
there
he
and
talks
listen
a lot
all the
about
time,
flat earthers and stuff too. It's funny. Anyways,
I like the idea that the Earth is hollow and that the inner core is like a little sun, and that there's like centrifugal force and then gravity. Gravity's pulling us on the surface in, but then there's like other beings on the inside that are getting pressed. Like
aliens.
Yeah, aliens are being pressed
Living
against
inside,
the crust of the Earth from the inside out, kind of like when you take like a barrel, not a barrel, but like a jug of water and spin it around. How the water sticks to the bottom,
the top.
Yeah, the
the
Earth
bottom.
spins.
like when you
it
swing your
forces
grocery
there.
bags around and the groceries
exactly.
stay.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool theory. Are they aliens or reptilians?
Both. What's the difference?
Yeah, dude, reptilians
came from Earth.
They're actually amphibious
I
aliens.
think.
Like Jar Jar Banks.
Jar Jar.
I'm pretty. Hold on. I'm pretty sure that reptilians. I'm not even gonna continue my
Reptilian
sentence.
humanoids. Sci-fi, bro.
All right.
Well,
Let's get back to the book.
Yeah.
Again.
basically, he says that
Flat earthers.
Gravity is one of those things that we can't like really argue against, but at the same time, he says our understanding of gravity will not be the same in 500 years. So he talks about Sir Isaac Newton, who's the guy who really like understood gravity first. But his understanding of gravity was very different from like Einstein's understanding of gravity. So Einstein understood that gravity is the warping of space-time, that you have like a bunch of mass weighs down on like this three-dimensional fabric that we kind of just float in, and it creates like these little depressions in the universe, and everything just kind of falls into those little gravity wells. But the way that Isaac Newton looked at it, it was that Earth was, at that time, the center of the universe, right? Because it was geocentric. The sun, in his mind, circled around the Earth, and so did all the stars. And he believed that everything kind of fell towards the natural place, right? The geocentric center of the universe. So everything was slowly falling towards the center of the universe, which was Earth at the time. We now understand that that's not the way that the universe works, but Isaac Newton wasn't wrong necessarily, but his understanding of it was wrong. But even that when Einstein starts talking about the warping of space-time, like gravity goes towards the sun because the sun's super dense and like it just pulls other stuff in its gravitational pull. When we look at like super subatomic particles, like quantum physics completely doesn't work that way. Like gravity doesn't work on that level. So like our understanding of something as simple as gravity has changed drastically in less than 1,000 years. And it's changed even more drastically in less than 100 years. So it's pretty easy to say that in the next, maybe 50 to 500 years, that our understanding of something as simple as like, drop an apple, it falls to the ground, may not be the same, as time goes by.
I think there's a cap on that, obviously, of like, it could be 200 years from now that we've figured out gravity to the fullest extent.
Well, that's what the thing is, right? Like we thought we knew gravity to the fullest extent. And
yeah, but
so we may think, in 200 years, we know everything there is to know about gravity. And then like another 500 years later, it could be different.
I mean, but how many times can that happen? How many times can that change, that theory?
I don't know, but it's one of those things, especially with science, I believe it's one of those things where every time you get an answer, it opens up more questions.
Yeah.
So, and then your understanding of the answers you got in the beginning start to change. So like science is one of those things that it's testable, but all the information you get's got to be interpreted, right? And that's the frustrating thing about our perspective of what's going on around us is we get pummeled with information all the time, but our brains are only able to process a very tiny part of that. And then our parts of our brain, smaller parts of our brain, have to like kind of pick those pieces of information and form an assumption or like an idea or an opinion on it, and then make decisions on that. And that's happening constantly all the time. It's going all the time that you've got this kind of like receiving information and making decisions off of that. And the problem with people in general is that because we get such a limited perspective, like a lot of times we make the wrong decision. People make the wrong decision all the time. People make mistakes all the time. And that's the frustrating thing about being human, is that even when you're talking, you make mistakes. Even when you're writing, you make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And literally, like, we're more imperfect than we are perfect. And that's so aggravating because we want to be perfect all the time. And that's why when somebody's faced with a problem, right? Like, we have a dead body and we don't know who killed this person. Like, now we've got to figure out who did it. And we would just want to blame anybody, just as long as we feel like we know that this person did it, and that goes for a million other things, tiny things. Who ate my cookies,
Right.
Stuff like that. I mean, but it happens all the time.
You're so right about everything we do as humans is sort of based on assumptions. Every opinion we make is based on assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Like, assumptions are rampant and facts are scarce.
So the glass
Bingo.
So to you, the glass is half empty in human perfection.
No, because at the same time, humans are the only species that learns more from their mistakes than they do from the things that they do right.
But being more imperfect than we are perfect, that would still be.
But we're the most like advanced species on this planet, and we're the most advanced species for light years. So it's, so far as we know,
Right.
I mean, it's like you can say that, and I can argue that point, but at the end of the day, like the cure, not the cure, but what was it? Penicillin was discovered by accident. A lot of really good things happen because of mistakes.
Right.
Like that's kind of what
see.
luck is.
Like
is an
chocolate
accident.
chips.
I see your
Chocolate
point.
chip cookies.
Chocolate chip cookies.
That was an accident.
There's a lot of
Serendipitous.
Serendipitous, exactly.
Luck. Yeah.
Ethan, you're a very lucky person. You're a very serendipitous individual.
Dude, I am. But it's because I'm out there all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be present to have crazy things happen to you, right? You can't just stay at home all day.
You're also a very open-minded individual.
Yes, that's very true. And that's why, like, different things happen to me than most individuals, right? Mm-hmm. And I am very open to taking a different pathway than has been taken before. So
I think there's a bit of a danger with having an open mind, though, because you can be open-minded and then you can get persuaded into doing things that normally you wouldn't normally do, and that's kind of like a slippery slope. People with open minds, that's a very slippery slope.
Like being gullible or more just...
That would be gullible, right?
It would be gullible.
You need to have a standard. If you're going to be open-minded, you still have to have somewhat of a standard, right? It's a balance, kind of like you have to moderate, what are the lines that you're not going to cross? And there's a lot of things, that are on the good side of that line. You know what I mean? And a lot of things that people just don't consider that are still on that side of the line.
But everyone draws a different line.
Right.
That's the frustrating thing.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to have your own standard. I mean, at least you should, right? Like, I have a standard,
It's all perspective. Perspectives. It's all perspectives.
Relative.
Would
it's
you
all
say
relative
that, like,
to who you are?
morality, like moral compasses are very flexible. That's something I've learned about like people. Some people's moral compass is, doesn't always point true to north. Some people point straight south. Yeah. But like it moves.
And some people are actually openly, south, like you said, instead of north.
Yeah.
And then other people, it's, they say they're north and they're actually like east or west to go along with that metaphor.
Exactly.
That moral compass, we should do an exercise later where we actually like map out like kind of like morals and where they fit in the like north, south, east, and west, and kind of use east and west with some kind of categories of like.
It's just tough, man, because society's morals have shifted significantly. Yeah. Even just in the past like 40 years.
I think 40 years ago, most of society's morals were based on religion, and specifically in America, the Christian
More so.
religion. More so than now, right?
I would say
mean,
like 200 years ago, because it was a lot.
it
but
depends where you're at in the
You're
culture.
looking at like the 60s, man. Like there was I would say people deviated a ton.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like right before the 60s, maybe like 50 or 60 years ago, 60 years ago, 60, 70.
Yeah.
Back like in the 40s and 50s, maybe.
Well, people kept having the revivals in the woods,
Yeah.
back in like the 1800s, early 1900s. We'd have these like big, they would take a bunch of people into the woods and they would kind of like, it was like real hellfire and brimstone sort of evangelist revivals of the Bible.
Almost a cult.
It was kind of like a cult, but it was more just like getting people back in touch with the roots of moral fortitude. At least that's how they phrase it. That's how they believed it, but they really believed it. And
Those are some very conservative values that came out of that.
yeah,
I think personally, culture shifts happen like once every 10 years. And inside of that, morals change too.
I think it's actually kind of getting quicker, right? So maybe like 100 or 200 years ago, the culture shift was maybe every like 25, 30 years. And then it became every 15 years. And now it's every 10 years and 5 years. And now it's every 2 years.
Well, and I'm wondering that, I mean, with what you're saying, I wonder if like the advancement in technology has decreased the amount of time culture shifts happen.
It has sped up the culture.
Well, in its obvious ways, yeah.
Change significantly.
I think that, and I'm drawing like a little infograph here, but I think it works like this. Like you have the far left side of like morality. This is the people who are super strict, right? And they slowly, the most strictly moral person in the world is not nearly as strict and moral as they used to be back in like 500 AD. But then you have like the people on the far, I would say the more progressive people would be on the right hand side, and that's like that one increases significantly, exponentially. They are expanding at like a rapid rate of moral ambiguity.
Right, I got you. So you start with 3 different individuals at the top of your graph, and then the first individual, over time gets less.
He stays on more of a
they
straight
stay
path.
more conservative, and your middle individual speeds up, and then the far right, least strict person. Those individuals in society are becoming a lot less conservative very quickly, a lot quicker, right? It's more rapid.
What would you
exponential
name,
instead of
what
linear.
would you name those three growths?
Just like strict, moderate, and liberal, or conservative, moderate, and liberal. I mean, it kind of goes along with like a political spectrum in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just your decisions and your view of the world are going to base how you make decisions and what you think is right and wrong. There's 3 parts of the brain, and I got another book called The Organized Mind by Daniel J. Levitin, which is very interesting, and it talked about 3 parts of the brain. The first one is at the very front. It's like right behind your forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex.
You mean your third eye?
Yeah, no, that's the pineal gland.
Pineal gland.
That's a very tiny part. This is the big front. Did you ever see that Nickelodeon short where the guys had the big front part of their head and they had the little stick with the wheel that they were walking on? I'm gonna pull that up and post it on there. But, like it's literally like this big chunk of brain right behind your forehead. That is what I call the mental movie screen. If you close your eyes and you imagine like a Rubik's Cube moving or an orange being peeled apart, the part of your brain that's lighting up is called the prefrontal cortex, and that's where a lot of decision making is made.
Aren't memories stored there?
Memories are stored in the hippocampus, which is this little horseshoe thing that's kind of in the center part of your brain. If you look at the brain, you got the 2 hemispheres, the left and right hemisphere. To me, I think they kind of look like 2 boxing gloves, but the hands are swapped. Like the thumb is on the outside rather than on the inside. Mm-hmm. But the thumbs kind of connect around, and those are called the, I believe, the temporal lobes. So when somebody is blaming another person, there's 2 parts of the brain that light up. One is the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of where we imagine stuff and we kind of process information in there. And then the other one is called it's a big word. It's temporoparietal junction, or TPJ. Yeah, you want to say it?
Temporoparietal junction. Yeah, you got it.
So it's literally, if you look at your hand, if the brain were like a fist, The knuckle that connects your thumb to the actual like meaty part of your hand, that's where it is on the brain. And it's interesting because that part of your brain, it does a lot of things. It connects with the limbic system, which controls emotion and behavior, motivation, long-term memory, and your sense of smell, which is also tied to long-term memory. That brings up memories quicker and stronger than anything else. And the thalamus, which is like this knot that sits on top of your spinal cord. The thalamus works on sensory and motor signals and processing. But the TPJ, like the little knuckle part of your brain, it does a lot of stuff, but it controls your ability to pay attention. It allows you to understand social cues. It allows you to empathize with others, have sympathy, and your understanding of other people's beliefs, intentions, and like their desires. And what they did is, this is a cool little study I read about. They took autistic people and they put them in a like a brain scanning. It was an fMRI, and they made them watch The Office. Which, if you guys have ever watched The Office, it's a super awkward show. It's really weird. Michael Scott, the main guy, is just like, oh man, he does things that are just so weird.
Right. There's a lot of room for those cues that you can pick up on and stuff.
And those parts of their brain, the left and right TPJs, because you got two of them. You got the left one, literally touch the top of your ear. You touch the top of your ear, move up 1 inch. That's where they are. They literally sit right there. Now, these two parts of your brain are able to understand social cues and your like perspective. People who have autism or like social disorders, those parts of their brain don't light up when they see someone doing something that's socially awkward at all.
So that also happens to people that aren't necessarily autistic, like Sheldon from The Office. Like, I mean, not from The Office, but from The Big Bang Theory. Okay. He can't pick up on cues, right? He always says he can't pick up on cues.
So
yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But he isn't autistic.
So I have a question.
I think he's just awkward. I think he just doesn't know any better. You know.
He's also a fictional character.
He is also a fictional character.
So you can't really base that on reality.
I'm sure he knows when something's
There are people
awkward.
like that though.
There are people like that. Well, I think they're just awkward and kind of like dopey.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between like dopey and not registering all social cues and someone who completely just blows by them and doesn't
because
understand.
it doesn't light up.
Right. Yeah, literally they don't understand.
It will just take Sheldon like longer to understand it. But these individuals who are autistic have absolutely no registering in their brain. So what other things, because I know you said that TPJ includes a lot of other aspects of your life and how you interact with people. Does that mean that these people who are autistic, like none of those functions are working?
I really don't know much about that. I just know that little excerpt about it is that they put them and they watched The Office and it didn't light up for them.
Wow, interesting.
Which is kind of cool.
So can you explain again all the things that the TPJ controls?
The TPJ is basically it helps you. There's two of them. There's a left and a right one. And they help you pay attention, understand social cues. They understand sympathy and empathy, which is like a connection with other people. And then it helps you understand basically another person's point of view, their perspective, their beliefs, why they're doing something that they're doing, and what they really want. And
it's like a emotional perception of other people's intention. Interesting.
And it connects with your senses, and it connects with your memory, and it connects with your
So it actually is extremely involved in how you perceive the world, and you're saying it interacts with your prefrontal cortex, which creates those like
it kind of ties in with those. Like those two things will work together. So what happens is your brain will interpret something that somebody does, right? And you feel like it gives you an emotion afterwards. You're like, I don't like that they did that. It'll also light up your thalamus, which it controls emotional memory. Right. So it helps you kind of compare what somebody did and you form like an opinion on it. And
I was just going to say that. Yeah. You were describing how opinions are formed in the human brain.
And then the front of your brain kind of plays out this scenario in your head and you kind of form an understanding of why they did something that they did. And if you're upset, emotional, a lot of times you won't make the right like conclusion afterwards. You'll make one where somebody's doing something wrong just because they're bad people. You know, you can easily demonize and put guilt on other people. And it's easier to judge than it is to sympathize. It's easier to like want to punish somebody for something that went wrong than it is to like try and come up with a solution now that things have gone awry.
And that ties in
Wow.
with how it's easier to be negative than it is to be positive.
Yeah,
It is.
I think it's super important the way like what you explained and understanding how your brain works. It's super important to be conscious and to know. Okay, it's easier for me as an individual just to, tell people that they did a horrible job, right? But I think if you're conscious of that, then you should do your best to like take the time and actually help figure out a solution, right? Because I've always said, like, it's so annoying to hear just people complain. It's like, it's one thing to complain. It's another to complain and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's you don't have to complain so much if you really want to, have some constructive criticism. But I think something that is hard for people to do, if you're going to be conscious enough to give that person constructive criticism, they also have to be conscious enough to receive that negative feedback and not just have that constructive criticism remind them of something, a memory like that has a bad emotion attached to it, and then them not actually, internalize that constructive feedback you're giving them. I think, I know people who will literally just like shut out because it reminds them of negative emotions. And like you said, people want to be perfect, and so it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear constructive criticism sometimes. But if you study the brain and how it works, it can help you be more conscious that that's just the internal or the initial instinct that you're going to have. But to overcome that and grow as an individual, you have to be conscious of that and, subdue those
You'd have to have
initial emotions.
You have to have a literal open mind.
How do you have a literal open mind? How do you do that?
Well, I would start with a scalpel and I would start cutting around the eye.
Okay, Hannibal.
How
does one go about having like an open mind? Because
well,
this
like
is the
you,
solution.
well, like you understand that you're now. I can't remember all the names of the parts of the brain that you were just talking about, other than the prefrontal cortex. That you said plays out an image in your head. Mm-hmm. That ties in with the FPJ, TPJ, sorry,
TPJ.
Which
right above your ears.
Right above your ears. All of your brain pretty much works together in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can understand that and develop your skills in that is having an open mind, because that allows you to be open to other people's mistakes and other people's.
You mean consciously open, like a conscious
right?
Open mind.
That's what, to me, that's what having an open mind is being consciously open and being able to consider what other people are going through and in any situation and not blaming them, not judging them, not being so quick to be negative. So remember how I said being negative is easier than being positive. It's harder to be positive than it is to be negative. To be positive all the time would mean that you have an open mind. And I mean, am I making sense? You know what I mean?
An open mind to always see the best in all situations, or
that's how to have a literal open mind.
Get something out of it.
I mean, there's times, because life is very difficult. If there's one thing I've learned since like birth, is that life is really hard. And for some people, it's harder for some people than it is for other people. And part of that may be their aptitude, it may be their circumstances. It may be their decisions that they make. People can literally self-sabotage and make their life harder. You can self-blame too. You can blame yourself for stuff. Sometimes it's deserved. Sometimes it's taking responsibility. But when I say self-blame, I don't usually mean taking responsibility. I mean that you are literally, something went wrong and you're saying it's my fault and I messed up and I suck as a person.
Right.
And sometimes that can be really bad.
Right. If you focus on the blame and not the solution, that's when it's bad.
Exactly. But when it comes to like having an open mind, my understanding, because I don't have the most open mind, but I do believe I have an open mind. I try really hard to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not gonna just let everybody get away with everything. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not gonna,
let people take advantage of you.
Yeah. It's very easy for someone like me to let people take advantage of me.
Dude, same.
Because I'm very patient. But at the same time, it's like, when it comes to having an open mind, I just try to put myself in other people's shoes and ask myself, why are they doing that? And then I say to myself, why would I do that? And then I say to myself, like, well, they're different than me. How would they probably do that if they were given the situation? And if it all kind of lines up, then I'm like, all right, well, I can't be mad at this person for doing something that I would do if I was in their shoes.
Right, yeah, and that's what I meant earlier. And to do that, you're using every part of your brain that requires the ability to be that open-minded.
Well, you're looking at it from multiple angles. You're looking at one situation. Most people look at a situation that happens and they only look at it from like their point
angle.
of view.
Right, their subjective perspective.
Yeah, exact subjective perspective. I like that.
Dude, I'm really good at coming up with like little catchy phrases.
Subjective perspective. But not everybody sees even the same situation from the same angle. Sometimes people. That's why you need multiple camera angles when you do like the play in in like football.
Right, and sometimes people are only seeing, even if they're not only subjective. Like if we're having a conversation and we're talking, we're passing our opinions back and forth. You know, some people are only thinking about those two sides, whereas like Riley has an opinion, Malvin has an opinion, Travis has an opinion, Lauren has an opinion. Like there's so many different opinions of just one thing. It's not binary, right? It's not kind of like a duality in perspective. It's omni perspective, right? These like viewpoints are coming from everywhere.
I don't like when people say you either see things in black and white or you see them in grayscale. Like I'm not one of those people that sees things in black and white. Like it's either this or it's that. It's 50% either one or the other. And this is where I fall, and that's the way that I'm going to stick to. I don't like that. I do like more people who see things in grayscale where they're like, well, yeah, I understand this point and also understand I understand why this person said this. I understand why the other person said that. Let's come to some sort of conclusion. But even that to me doesn't really paint the full picture, because life is not in grayscale, it's in color, right? And like it's really hard to see things in color when you have like this little itty bitty perspective. You have to really take the time to look at a situation and understand it.
Do you think the color spectrum is like unlimited almost?
100%, dude.
Yeah. So let's go back to just like the idea about that open mind and like the value that comes from it.
Before we do that,
yeah, sure.
I wanted to ask, like, do you have any pointers on how you can develop your perspective into the best perspective that one can have?
Like an open-minded perspective.
I think you got to meet a lot of people, and you have to be very curious about other people. You have to put yourself in other people's shoes.
You have to be interested.
And when you hear something quote unquote weird, instead of taking it like somebody who's not necessarily open-minded and just shoving it off as that's different, like when you hear something weird, you have like this, to me, it's like this comforting feeling inside, like, okay, I can accept what this person just said or just did and understand it more than Sally over here. You know what I mean? Like, that makes sense.
I think so. Are you just talking about how because you're already weird, you accept weird people too? Even if they're weird in a different way than you are?
Yeah. I didn't want to say it like that. But yeah.
I'm super weird.
Well,
so.
and the word weird has like this weird vibe to it, right? The word weird is weird in itself because weird is not necessarily negative.
Weird.
Weird. I'm wired.
Weird's not negative though. That's what I'm saying. It's not negative. So go. All right, my bad. Go back to.
Malvin actually had a suggestion. He was talking about how being open-minded can actually be like a step to self-realization. So like to be aware of yourself, you have to be open-minded.
Yeah.
What do you mean by self-realization?
So we kind of believe that you have to, or like one of the goals of, at least in my opinion, one of the goals of life is to understand yourself really well, right? To understand the best version of yourself and like achieve that. So it's kind of the top of the psychological ladder. Like you've got all your security needs covered. You've got all your safety needs covered. You've got all your, your food, your basics, your love. And then finally at the top, it's like understanding yourself is like the highest like level of enlightenment, right? Kind of like awareness.
And to me, understanding yourself is understanding how crazy it is to be alive. And
that's part of it. Yeah.
And like I remember one time I was like looking in the mirror and I just was like, I had this like realization, like I am myself, and like I know how that sounds. I know, but
you're just like, oh my god, I'm a person.
Well, it's like like that unanswered feeling that you can get if you do look at yourself in the mirror. Just stare at your eyes in the mirror and realize that you are living just like everybody else.
It's somewhat humbling, I think.
And that's as far as I can go to describe that. I don't know how else to. I mean, that to me is self-realization.
So can you now that I understand what you mean by that? Well, can you read what Malvin said it again?
So what he said specifically was open-minded, realizing where you are, self-realization. All right, hold on.
Open-minded, realizing where you are.
So if you're open-minded, you're better able to understand yourself.
Well, being open-minded is
Yeah,
realizing where you are
and where you
self-realization.
are in life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you're.
Go ahead. We're gonna bring Malvin on for a second.
Hey, Malvin.
Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
What we were talking about during my episode was like, we were talking about, for example, me and Riley have a conflict with each other, and the whole time hypothetically, and the whole time I'm thinking, man, why did he do that? Instead of realizing, okay, where am I at in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
am I the problem in this whole thing? And that's, I mean, when you said that, that's what made me think about that is that whole self-realization thing is. Yeah. Where am I in this situation? Where do I fit in?
Yeah.
And realizing where you are to find out if you are the problem.
Okay.
Right. When we were talking about problems and
that's a good point.
People have issues with each other because they're seeing different perspectives. Something that Malvin talked about on his episode was, like relationships are hard. Like you said, life is hard. Life with other people is hard. And even people you love, you don't always, you get in conflict sometimes, no matter what.
Always.
Issues. And so to solve that, you have to understand yourself and be aware of yourself.
Yeah.
And what part in this issue are you playing? And how do you...
And being honest in that answer, too.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, yeah, I am kind of a douche. Or, I am not being a douche in this situation.
Sometimes you have to go to the other person and admit your faults first before you can actually, before that person will open up, and then you guys can come to a solution through communication.
And to
you
do
let your
that...
guard down and humble yourself.
To do that successfully, you have to be completely aware of what you're saying in the moment. You can't necessarily have this issue where you say things that you don't mean. And I know that everybody does that, but to eliminate that as much as possible will allow you to be able to look back and reflect on the argument you might have just had and pick out those issues that you brought to the table. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And in a way, each situation is different, and so it's hard to just say, "Oh, I understand everything."
Well, it's almost like if only everybody could think that way, right?
Yeah.
But you can't force people to think that way. You can only influence, in my opinion, and that goes with everything in life. You can't tell somebody what to do. You can only influence, and that's why there's good influences and there's bad influences. And
what's that thing your dad always says about change?
What? What do you mean?
You can't change anybody else. You can only change yourself.
You can't change anybody else. You can only change yourself. And that's, the influence that you have on yourself is that you can only change what you do. And in return, that's inevitably going to influence somebody else, whether you know them or not, to do that exact same thing.
I
Correct.
Like that a lot.
If you want a better situation, the only thing you can do is change yourself. Right. So you have to be aware of yourself.
I don't like the situation. What can I do to change what I can control? Because I can't go over there and tell Tyler, hey, do this. Because Tyler's not going to do that. Because humans don't work that way. That's just how it goes.
I'm nice. I might do it.
No, not to the extent. Not to the extent.
You can't move another person's hands.
Right. Exactly. You can only show them, hey, this is how you pick up a pen. You can do it whether or not you want to.
You can explain
and
to
then
them.
You do it.
Explain to somebody why they need to pick up the pen if they want to write something down to communicate. That gives them the reason to.
There's so many little factors that go into getting somebody to alter their behavior. And Malvin, to answer your question about self-actualization based on having an open mind, I work in the sales world, and my company in particular is very good at helping people grow as individuals. So one thing that they ask, or one thing I ask myself a lot now is, who do I want to be? And who is the guy? I think it was Matthew McConaughey in like a big speech was talking about his hero is himself 2 years from now, because he knows he's going to be better 2 years from now, and he's going to work really hard to get to be a better person. So his hero is the best ideal version of himself that he could possibly be, like the perfect version of himself.
I sort of like that.
He's competitive. He's competitive with his future self.
Exactly.
I always kind of go with that cliche, like be better than the person you were yesterday. Be better than the person that you think you want to be in 2 years.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to self-actualization, you have to you have to find out exactly who you are. And that's where having an open mind, not necessarily even an open mind, but being able to get outside of yourself and look at yourself objectively.
Right.
Say, am I in shape? Am I nice to other people? Do I consider other people's feelings?
Am I productive?
Am I productive?
Am I
again,
producing value
lazy?
in other people's lives?
One issue with that is honesty. And how are you supposed to be honest with yourself if it's hard to be honest?
How can you be honest with other people if you can't be honest with yourself?
Exactly. How can you go about that mindset without being 100% honest? I mean, while being 100% honest, because it's almost impossible to be 100% honest with yourself because of other influences. You're like, well, you start having doubts and you start having the natural human nature.
So that's why I think it's really important to actually sit down and think about these things, right? If you can kind of sit down and maybe you do it through a meditation or just like, sitting down with a piece of paper and actually spending time frequently thinking about who am I?
Yeah.
Where do I want to be? And who am I again? And how do I change myself to get to where I want to be? Exactly. So you actually have to sit down. You have to make a plan. Like growth doesn't just happen. You have to have a plan to grow.
Yeah. And I think a lot of when you sit down and you meditate like that, and when you sit down, you write with a piece of paper, like this is who I want to be by the end of the year. And this is what I'm going to do it. And this is what I'm going to do tomorrow to actually get that done. What you're doing is you're like phrasing your perspective so that you've built a path for yourself. And you may not walk the exact path to get there, but you're going to get closer by doing that. And if you really have the what's I think grit to actually stick to it and make it happen and not give up on your goals, you'll get there. But like ultimately when you're trying to self-actualize, and not just self-actualize, but like be the type of person you really want to be, you got to get a Venn diagram of who you are and compare it to what you want to be. And in doing so, you'll be able to find all the things that you're doing right in your life, and you'll be able to find all the things that you're not doing right with your life, like a SWOT analysis of your character.
I love that. That is an actionable tool, right? Creating a Venn diagram of who you are, who you want to be, and what are the things you have in common, right? Focus on those, make sure you don't lose those aspects, and then change the things that aren't who you want to be and adopt the things to be who you want to be.
Bingo.
That's great.
A cool thing to do would be to come up with a program that you could allow people to like create their own.
We'll talk about this afterwards.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty
Like
cool.
to be able to
We don't wanna
determine
record this. It's a trade secret.
to be able to determine what. Yeah. Let's.
We'll talk about this later.
Well, I was thinking, I love playing poker. I don't know if you guys are into poker, but all the best poker books in the world, they tell you that you're not really playing your cards, you're playing the other person. And when you were talking about how I can't make you pick up a pencil, I can only influence you to pick up that pencil. I mean, that's what I see in poker. Like you can only see your cards. You can't see the other person's cards. But if you're really perceptive and not necessarily have an open mind, but you really you pay attention, which is part of, I believe, the right TPJ is attention and paying attention. So if you're flexing that part of your brain, you're able to see what another person's doing and how they're acting and behaving, and you're able to interpret that and figure out why they're doing that. And you can then decide if your cards are better than theirs, whether or not you should make a certain action. So like the people who are really good at poker and in that sense really good at changing other people's mind and forcing them to do stuff, like those people have really strong TPJs. And I think those people are also usually not quick to blame others or incredibly quick to blame others, because you can trick your own mind into believing something that is not true if you get a benefit out of it. And you can do the same thing with other people, but it's all about winning. Poker's all about winning, and you have to win by making other people lose. And that's the kind of like cutthroat world that we live in sometimes. And that's the unfortunate thing about being human in a world with limited resources. If it was unlimited, we wouldn't have to do that. If it was, plentiful, we wouldn't feel the need to push other people to lose,
if you are self-actualized and you are, to the point where you're self-sufficient, right? And you're producing more value than you're taking from the world, right? I think that's when you get past that I'm competing for everybody else. That's when you can become collaborative. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you can't go and work with somebody else on like a cool project if you don't even have enough like money to feed yourself, right? Does
True.
that make sense?
True.
So it's really important to understand yourself so you can grow and become the best version of yourself so that you can have the most positive influence on other people. I think that's the value of a person is the positive impacts that they have on other people. That's my opinion.
That's the true value of a person. Yeah.
Well, that's like the societal value of the person. But like, there are people who, how do I put this? Powerful people don't necessarily do good for others. They have a lot of value, maybe not good value, maybe they have negative impact, but they have a lot of strength in their ability to do things.
Power doesn't imply value. I mean, okay, so in a way it does, right? And I guess I'm thinking about two different forms of value, you know, like what you have may be coveted by other people in a sense that's valuable, but what you have also might help other people. And in that sense, it's valuable, right?
Yeah.
So there's two senses of the word valuable is like kind of what I'm getting at.
I mean,
That's
$1 million in my bank account has just as much buying power. It is just as valuable as $1 million in, you know, Pablo Escobar's bank account.
Right. But what you're going to use it for is probably going to be a lot different and could provide a
significantly
positive
so.
impact, right? So money is valuable, but it doesn't actually provide a value inherently, right? So like there is a difference between, you know, power and value,
I think there is.
but it's only that specific type of value because power can be valuable.
So are you saying that you can use money like you can use power?
Oh yeah.
Money has power.
Yes.
Yeah, but what you're saying, Ethan, is I don't know, because money just has power. So
we kind of got on a tangent with that. I wanted to talk, or go ahead, Tyler. You
Well,
had something.
I just Googled value, and it is the importance, worth, or usefulness of something.
Importance, worth, or usefulness.
Yeah, the advantage,
So-
the benefit, the profit, the good, the help, the merit.
Wait, what were the first three again? Importance, worth, and
Yeah, it's
usefulness.
the importance, worth, and usefulness of something.
Right. So I was talking about like things that are useful and things that hold worth. Like money holds worth, but you know what you do with that can be useful. Like helping people who come from privileged areas. That would be useful in some way. The nonprofit.
It sounds nice to say that, but
Right.
like at the same time, dude, it's like you can twist anything. You can twist anything to make it bad. You can say, oh God, this is awful. I'm gonna say something awful, but I just to prove this point. So you ever hear the story of Easter Island? You know the big
heads.
the big heads.
You have a stone.
So a bunch of people on boats went over to Easter Island. And if you go there now, it's abandoned and there's no trees, but there used to be trees, and that's how they moved all the big stones to carve these giant heads that are sitting there, and they're huge. They go all the way underground. What happened is they had these competitions every year, and the winner of the competition would get all the food. They get their own house, like they get all the women, and they would just chill out and get fed. They were kings of that year. It was kind of like an Olympics that they would do. Well, they overfarmed, they overproduced. And there were too many people on the island, and eventually there was no food. So they all died, which is awful. So there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. It's unsustainable, and there's too many mouths to feed. So when we're donating money to these really poor countries where they're not returning a lot of value, you know what I'm saying? They're just farming for tiny communities. Is that really helping, or is that just wasting money? That's how you can paint a picture of something awful and make it sound reasonable. It is very simple morally to say you should donate money to Africa because people are starving in Cambodia. It is a little bit harder, but you can still make the argument that it's the wrong thing to do. That's moral ambiguity right there.
Right. Interesting. So you're talking about, because there's more than one ways to bring value to the world, right?
Yeah.
You can bring value to people on an individual level, or you can do something that brings a value to everybody.
Yeah.
Right. You can't, like, it's something that's not exclusive.
Yeah.
So if you help the environment, right? If you stop pollution or clean up pollution, you're helping everybody inherently, no matter what, no matter how many mouths there are to feed, right? You're helping people now and in the future. But if you just go and you feed some mouths now, you're helping those people right now, but you're not providing a lot of value for everybody.
Ethan, do you want to keep this game going? Because I can provide the alternative to that too.
Sure.
Okay. The ways that people go about improving the environment are incredibly stressful on our economy, which causes people to lose money in the now. So it doesn't just help the people now, it only helps the people in the future. It helps
people in the future, yeah.
So it is negatively impacting the people here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like that's why our current administration is trying to slow down they're not trying to speed up the greenhouse effect, but they're trying to stall this clean energy movement because it is negatively impacting the current energy policies that the current ways that we make energy, like from coal, non-renewable resources is where all of our money's been invested.
Right. So we talked a little bit about culture and how culture moves really quickly. Mm-hmm. So there's like some negative aspects of the American culture right now, A.K.A. Cash Me Outside girl.
I can't even talk about this girl. I feel so bad for this girl.
No, but the thing is, she represents like a huge like population. Like 7 million people follow her on Instagram. It's insane.
She's a joke.
I know she's a joke, right?
We laugh at her.
There's people that are making money off of her.
It's not necessarily 7 million people that adore her. It's 7 million people who
but that's where they're putting their attention. Is to this girl who doesn't deserve it. They
put their attention to everything. They're glorifying her, and they shouldn't. But what are you going to do? You know, it's like all you can do is glorify things.
All I'm saying is maybe we should just be helping future people more, so they have a place to live that's not completely destroyed.
Personally, I don't think that we should worry about,
like you said,
what negative impacts it has on us now when it's creating positive things for other people. Yeah. And these negative impacts are going to be fixed in the future.
You think so?
There's a solution to...
At least we hope so, right?
I personally think that there's enough smart people out there that if a problem arises, then there's going to be an answer, whether it's a day later or a year later, there's going to be an answer to...
Do you think that answer will be exclusive, though, and only certain people will reap the benefits of whatever solution comes? I don't know. These are like super deep conversations, and
it's
we could have a whole other episode.
Compare that when we're saying something so vague as like, is it going to be helpful?
Yeah.
Like it's like individual things, like is putting tax credits in Georgia to make things easier for you to get solar panels. Is that going to benefit people?
Right.
Like maybe.
You know what will benefit people is what we were talking about earlier, right? Like learning how to self-actualize and stuff. Yeah. We've gotten on this tangent of like things that are out there, right? Let's talk about the things we have going on here.
The reason that I brought that stuff up is that it's easy to put blame when you rationalize things. That's rationalization. That stuff I was just doing was using those 3 parts of my mind so I could create this perspective, which you can then argue. And if you argue something with conviction and you overcome the conversation, you can influence enough people so that they make decisions. And if you get the wrong person arguing the wrong point, literally wrong as in the sense that the guy we're talking about, Chuck Klosterman, where he's talking about this is actually wrong. Like the earth is not the center of the universe. It isn't. If you get the wrong person who is overcoming everybody else, then you end up with toxic, catastrophic circumstances that could hurt us in the long and short run.
Yeah. Damn. So
I still think that's a sacrifice you have to take to grow as a civilization and just as a planet and whole.
What is
your point?
Well, my point?
Yeah. Everything you just said. I mean,
You think we have to be wrong for a certain period of time to eventually get it right?
I'm kind of like disagreeing and agreeing with you at the same time.
Saying that what I just said was accurate, but at the same time, it's not like toxic for us to be wrong from time to time.
It's almost like we have to be wrong from time to time
to learn and grow from it.
Yeah, of course.
That makes sense, right? As long as it's not too terrible.
On every level, you have to be wrong to grow. That's why making mistakes, if you learn from those mistakes, you'll grow from it.
Can you give me an example in history where that happened?
Oh, God.
Well, I don't know if we need to get into examples.
That's fine.
No,
let's go back.
but no, you're right. As individuals, we grow, we learn from our mistakes. I think Riley's just saying as a society, we make mistakes and then we learn from them.
I'm also saying that it's just going to happen. Like, mistakes are going to happen as a society. whether we want them to or not, whether we have this huge elaborate plan that's going to, what we think, eliminate those mistakes, it's still not going to work.
Yeah.
Like there's too many people.
But you know what you can
and I'm
control?
not being negative. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to be realistic. In
Yeah. You know what you can control though?
Yourself.
Exactly. Right. So let's.
I'm not trying to.
No,
We're good.
Start.
So
we're good, man.
I want to get back to just like kind of on a personal level. Like I have a purpose card. I actually read it 2 weeks ago, like my professional one. I have a personal one, and I wrote it 3 or 4 years ago. And you were talking about kind of having a set. We were talking about having a structure, right? Like having your Venn diagram of who you are and where you want to be, right? How do you really figure out? How do you define who you want to be? And so I think it starts with like a very vague idea of like, I want to be a person that helps people change from a negative to a positive mindset. I want to be a person that creates value through some sort of like content, through mass communications, right? It's kind of figuring out what's your biggest asset to the world that you want to bring, and creating a purpose card from that, and then designing around that idea, that notion, the rest of who you need to be to make that happen.
Yeah.
And if you have that intention, then it starts to just happen anyway, right? The doors open that you need to open, as long as you're keeping that idea conscious and taking every opportunity to make that happen, which is what I've been doing with this podcast.
Intention is like the key to open up the door.
Yeah. You got to know who you want to be.
Whatever your intention is, has a door.
You got to have an intention.
And that intention is the key to get that door open. But you just have to believe that.
I think something cool that you mentioned earlier was flexing your brain.
Yeah.
So all of these aspects, all of these are parts of your brain that you brought up on this episode. Do you think you can really like flex those and like make your empathy, the part of your brain that controls empathy stronger?
If you focus on it.
Yeah.
If you decide that you want to like put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can do it.
That's called emotional intelligence, right? Like EQ instead of IQ.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's super important. And people who have a high EQ probably use blame as constructive criticism, and they don't call it blame. You know what I mean? They're not trying to blame anybody. They're just saying, here's what happened, right?
Yeah.
Here's the direct cause. It's maybe tied to a specific person, so we need to address those actions and say, here's a better solution. Here's something you could have done better. And that's where it's sticky, because nobody wants to hear that they're wrong, right?
Again, a lot of this concept of blame has to do with responsibility. And the person you can say that, what is the responsibility tied to? Is the responsibility tied to the wrongdoing, or is the responsibility tied to the solution? So if you're saying that you hit my car, that's your fault, we're to blame, that's where it's tied to the wrongdoing. If you're taking the responsibility tied to the solution, you start small. You're like, let's get our cars out of the road so that we don't hold up traffic.
Right.
And I think that's a good example of how to be a positive person, is to say, well, I know that this sucks, but like, let's take the next step so that we can do the right thing, the morally right thing.
Right. I like that. It's even if somebody else is to blame, having the responsibility taking the responsibility to help make it better with that person, hopefully. But even if they don't, it's still a responsibility to try and make it better, or remove yourself from the situation.
And it's how fast that you accept that situation is
that's true too.
Like, you're like, okay.
Acceptance, man. That's a good word.
But it's important to be conscious of how your brain works and know that like a ton of emotions are going to come at you very quickly, and it's going to bring up past memories, but it's all tied together in how you perceive things.
Things are easier.
Throw blame, but it's a lot harder to actually slow down and get through that and come up with a solution.
Right. And everything's easier to accept than others. I mean,
Are you saying like some things is easier to accept than others?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some things are easier. It depends on the gravity of the situation.
Again, we keep coming back to perspectives and situations. And,
I think open mind has a lot to do with being accepting.
Yeah.
People who are open-minded.
And that's what I was trying to say earlier, is like when somebody says something weird, you're accepting to that. And when I say something weird, I'm being very broad. I'm talking about anything that's weird. Is how fast you accept it is how open-minded you are.
Yeah. how quick you accept it is how open-minded you are. I think that is very astute. I think that's very accurate.
Tyler, do you have any final thoughts or questions, comments, feelings?
Mm-hmm.
I do want you to plug your Instagram again and your Facebook and any other music you're working on with any other bands or artists or anything. Plug all of that for sure. I
mean, if you want to find me on Instagram, you are more than welcome to follow my account. It's _mirror, MIRROR, _style, STYLE, _. So _MIRROR, _STYLE, _. Really terrible Instagram handle, but
okay.
We'll post it so you guys
mirror
can find it.
_
there will be a
style
link. We'll put a link to in the video in the description.
If you actually want to like talk with me or anything, you should probably just add me on Snapchat because that's where I post all my stuff. That's just mirror _style. That's the easiest place to find me.
I got you.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I hope you guys had a lot to reconsider.
Yeah. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Peace out.
Thanks, you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you.